Like, Cath, I've been a huge admirer of your work for a very long time. I've been following on Instagram for a while because I just love the real, authentic, compassionate and caring messages you are constantly putting out to the world. And as someone who, when you're dealing with burnout, when you're struggling, you can feel so lonely and isolated. And it's just like going along your Instagram, it's like a soothing balm. So thank you, because I know I'm not the only one who you're just like doing that for. It's just beautiful. And I love how you really do champion supporting parents who are parenting after their own childhood trauma, because that is tricky. And I feel there's a lot of burnt out parents out there who that's the trenches they're walking through. To start us off, I would love you to share a little bit about your own experiences with burnout, because I love how you're constantly saying you are walking this path. You are doing the work daily. It's not like you're sat there going, I have the magic fix and this is what it is. Like, you are doing this work every day. So it would be lovely if you could start us off by
Thank
telling
you
us
so much.
a little bit about your own experiences with burnout.
Thank you so much for having me on, Flic. First of all, that's very kind and generous. Thank you for asking me, and also for your really warm feedback. As you were saying that, and you said to me, you're doing this for everyone constantly on your Instagram. I was thinking, oh, am I on my own path to burnout with that? But anyway, that's a secret.
No.
Okay, so let me, I guess, I mean, there's more and more research about parental burnout, but I won't go necessarily into the research right now. But I think that my own experience of burnout was before I actually had children.
Right.
When I used to work in financial services, I kind of had three main experiences of burnout. The first one, I just couldn't move one day on the sofa. And I had terrible muscle pain, and everything felt uncomfortable in my body. And I had to take some time off work. And I didn't know that that was burnout at the time. I also had an undiagnosed autoimmune condition, and that's also related to burnout, because I think that, they've got the same origins, essentially. So then I took some time off work, and I worked in at that point, I worked in financial services. And there's a kind of a culture like of overworking. Overworking is really celebrated, like long nights. I worked both in investment banks and in consulting firms, and like things like all-nighters are really celebrated. Not that I actually did all-nighters, thank God, but that like late working, getting to work really early, always over-delivering, that kind of culture permeates so much of our actual work culture. And that time I just took a bit of time off work. The second time I had burnout, I got signed off work. And what I didn't realize at the time was how common this actually is. Like where I worked in London, all these big banks and firms have occupational health doctors, and they have private centers that they work with. But it's because there's so many of the staff that are going through this. And I felt covered in shame at that point, that I was like, I couldn't kind of hack it. Why couldn't I just keep on pushing? And that was also related to my thyroid at that point. And so I had to have an increase in my thyroid medication. And then the next burnout was really after a very traumatic year in my life. And again, I got signed off work. And then I actually went into an addiction treatment center, and I was on a whole process of healing and everything. But I think that it's very interesting to notice how what I noticed about burnout is that it's my own patterns that really drive it. And that things that are often celebrated in society are really so unhelpful for us personally. But it takes, like sometimes, I mean, listen to me, this is 3 runs at burnout, and I'm telling you, like 3 separate incidents. It takes, sometimes you have to have the same thing happen many times before you kind of really get the message,
Yeah.
And I'm trying to make sure I don't need to have that happen again.
You know what, though? That's really reassuring to hear. Because, the irony is I burnt out and then I started talking about it, writing about it, podcasting about it. And then honestly,
Yeah.
Kath, I had a little bit of a burnout from talking about burnout. And I was like, oh
Yes.
my God, I'm the most ineffective person to be doing this. But then I spoke to a doctor who had done the same thing. And hearing
Yeah.
you say that, that's really reassuring because I know there's going to be people out there going, what is wrong with me? Why do I keep doing
Yeah.
this? And, we're so hard on ourselves, aren't we?
Yeah.
Oh,
So hard on ourselves. And I mean, if we had to answer that question very succinctly, we keep on doing it to ourselves because it's part of our safety and survival wiring from childhood. The underlying pattern. I mean, lots of the research shows that one of the main contributors to burnout is perfectionism. And perfectionism is arises generally always in our childhood, either in our family home or sometimes at school if there's a lot of shaming at school that we kind of develop into a perfectionist there. But and that messaging around you need to get things perfect to be okay, to be an okay human, you have to be perfect. That's debilitating because you can't ever be perfect, but we keep on striving for that, but we're not even aware of that often.
yeah. Absolutely. I love how you talk a lot about the nervous system, because this is something I really had to look at for my own burnout and how I help other people uh, look at theirs. The nervous system, it's that paradox, isn't it? When I think of parents, it's that paradox of you're trying to, slay parenting and do the best. Meanwhile, you're operating from such this kind of reactive nervous system that
Yeah.
from your own childhood. And I know that's something
Yeah.
you really help shine a light on for people.
Yeah. Yes. So should I explain a bit what
I'd love you to actually. Yes, please. Thank you.
okay. Well, so our nervous system is shaped by the nervous systems we grow up around. And what's really key is what are our stress responses? Like, how do we respond to stress? Do we respond to stress in a way where our frontal cortex goes totally offline and we just go a bit crazy? We either go into fight, flight, we freeze or we shut down, or we kind of really go into fawning. And many of us grew up with parents who, and that sort of nervous system, which is very reactive, means we have a very narrow window of tolerance. So we have a narrow band within which we can function without getting really overwhelmed or shut down. And that band is very much based on our physiological markers. So it's very much like, what's your blood pressure doing? What's your heart rate doing? How hot are you? Are you sweating? Are you feeling very overwhelmed from a sensory perspective? And a lot of the time you notice that when you started to maybe say go into a rage or something, you've got hotter, your heart is racing, your blood pressure's raised. And in that place where we've got a lot of stress hormones pumping through our body, we switch away from using our frontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that typically manages the central part of our brain, so our amygdala, and then also our brainstem to kind of has mastery over those. And we just go into these responses, which are in our brainstem, essentially, which is like an older part of our brain. And I mean, I'm massively simplifying stuff here, but when we've had parents who, if we spilt a glass of milk, or if we didn't want to hug our granny, or we threw our cup, or we threw our food, or we had a meltdown in the parking lot, which we all do, we all did.
Yeah.
Children haven't changed. We all were doing this. But in my generation, I'm 48, there was not really much understanding about that sort of stuff. And behaviorism really dominated parenting. And so that would be that we would reward good behavior and punish bad behavior.
Yeah.
And that our mother would have a freak out, or a father would have a freak out if we spilt the milk, and we maybe got smacked for spilling the milk, or we got sent away for spilling the milk because there was an idea that we could manage more things than we could. If you know what I mean? Like we're only really learning now how well, no, I mean, I think some parents have had an awareness that a child is a child, so a child can't perform at an adult level, but many people really expect their children to be able to do things to a level of competence which the child cannot do. And because they are often perfectionists, they expect perfect from their child. So if I'm a perfectionist who can't bear crumbs, because cleaning is something that makes me feel in control, if my child like makes a huge mess with their food, that's going to send me crazy. And so I'm very reactive then in my nervous system, and I'm creating a child who is also going to be very reactive in their nervous system, because they've never, when something stressful has happened, no one said, oh, that's okay, don't worry, we just, we spill milk. Of course you do. I always make mistakes like that, and really normalized it and being emotionally connected in that stress. Because what happens, I'm really like going on now. Am I going around
No,
the
I
house?
love it. I keep going. I love it.
Just tell me if I'm talking too much.
Never, Cath. Keep coming.
There's that thing about, if someone says, even now, like if I make a mistake and I go, oh, no worries, it's okay, no biggie, that's fine. It's so calming. You're just like, oh yeah, we can survive this. We can survive our own humanness. But so many of us have learned that no one can survive our own humanness, like, as we were as children. And so this perfectionism develops, because perfectionism is a cover over for shame.
Oh, yeah.
It's a defense against not being honored and seen and accepted and heard in all our messy beauty as a child.
Yeah.
And very importantly, actually, in perfectionism, one of the things the research shows is that we haven't had our negative affect held. So we haven't had, because if we imagine all the feelings in the world in a circle, 50% of them might be like what we might term positive, like, I don't know, happiness, joy, all the things that you want your child to be happy and kind or whatever. But then there's also rage, anger, boredom, apathy, disgust, disdain, contempt. And we need to also know that it's okay to have those feelings and emotions. But many of us don't learn that. And so the perfectionism is a lot about, I have to be a certain way to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about it, there's going to be people, well, certainly I did this. So you're going to that work environment and, you're kind of, and I worked in a tech startup. So again, it's that badge of honor, working all hours. You're up till 3, you're up till 4. Oh my God, that's amazing. Like, do you know, it's that badge of honor. And
like, just have another Red Bull, don't sleep.
oh my God, I know exactly. You know what? I can remember doing, I swapped my phone with one of my sons. And you know how you get the health data on your phone? I never paid attention to it when I was like burning out. But it was really sad, Cath. I noticed that there was a period of 3 months towards the end before I left my job, where my average sleep was 3 hours and 42 minutes. And I was like, what the hell? But I swear I didn't even know. I disassociated myself so much that I didn't even clue into the fact this was happening. I think a lot of people who burn out, they're like shocked. They're kind of, it just creeps through the back door, doesn't it? Because you're just so focused on, I guess it's that perfectionism, it's that surviving, it's working with that triggered nervous system that you so dissociated from what you're feeling and experiencing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really great that you talked about dissociation, because that's the facilitator, if we think about it, because if we're very connected to our bodies,
yes,
then we notice, oh yes, I'm really tired. I actually can't keep my eyes open and it's 7 p.m. So I'm going to take myself to sleep. But many of us are very disconnected. And that starts in childhood, because if you don't have someone being with you and loving you gently and helping you connect to your body and knowing it's okay and being with you through everything, dissociation and disconnecting is such a fabulous survival strategy. It's a fabulous survival strategy. Like, dissociation gets a really bad rap, and I think it's like kind of really it's not appreciating enough of the nuance of why we have dissociated. And we've dissociated to survive stuff in our childhood where there just wasn't enough capacity coming from my parents, and we couldn't be present in whatever was going on in our family home. And I mean, it's not to say we don't have to beat up on our parents, but if we think about my age, like my parents were parented by people who were in the Second World War.
Yes.
And so those parents were not going to be present for my parents.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of addiction. And so that's also, again, disconnection. And so then they have not been learned to be present in their bodies. So how can they help us be present in our bodies?
Yeah.
So if we, like, I really think burnout recovery could be characterized as reconnection to self. And like really tuning into all the messages that your body tells all the time.
Yeah, I love that. Reconnection to yourself. Because I've often thought, oh my gosh, it's my experience, it was like a realignment. It was coming back home to myself. What did I actually like? Because you spend decades not even, you're just providing, and giving to others, and as you say, it comes from that little nervous system that's just trying to stay safe and crisis manage and be, and so I love that. It is that reconnection to yourself. It's which is why, and anyone listening to this who's really struggling, they're like, oh my God, this is awful. But why, I don't know, burnout recovery, stick with the path. It's a bit of a gift in the way. Like you have a real chance to look at what is working for you and what isn't, and changing that.
And
I don't
recalibrating.
Oh, recalibrating. Yeah. Yeah. It's it can feel very lonely, can't it, Cath, when you're doing this?
It's very lonely. I mean, I think it's very it's so, because I think also it can be very depressing to be in the state where we feel like, how come I can't go on at the same pace?
Yeah.
And why do I have to tend to myself so much? And I think that we have to tend to ourselves so much in some way. I think many of us have to learn as adults to really tend to ourselves because we haven't been tended to enough as children.
Yeah.
And there's so much grief, because there's also so much grief in a burnout, in a burnout journey, or in a burnout recovery journey.
Oh, I'm so glad you said yes. There is a lot of grief, and I wasn't expecting that. There's a lot of kind of like looking at things that you kind of missed out on, or it's also interesting, isn't it? Because, and you must find this with your clients, that it's kind of frustrating that you can't be on go, go, go mode all the time, because there's an element of, we grew up with, we were worthy if we were slaying all of these goals and achieving all of these metrics. And I found that it was almost like if I just had a normal day, I was like, well, that's not good, is it? Because I was so used to just overachieving. And, I can remember a colleague said, oh my gosh, Flic, you're like a machine. Now, if someone said that to me now, I'd be like, oh my God, that's really bloody sad. But honestly, rewind 4 years ago, I was like, yes, I'm doing all right.
No, I mean, I love that you say that, because sometimes I've said to my husband, I feel like a machine, because it's very difficult to let this go. It's very difficult. The recalibration that I'm talking about, I'm still recalibrating. It's very difficult to kind of, because there's such a high, there's a high that comes from our own stress hormones, essentially.
Yes.
Of having them pump around our body, and it disconnects again that really like feeling into, oh, I'm actually really physically tired, but now because I've got so much adrenaline coursing around in me, I'm in that tired but wired space. But in that tired but wired space, I might be able to do, like, I don't know, a whole lot more chores, or look at my to-do list and crack on with a few things, which then makes us feel proud of ourselves. But it's such a false premise. It's such a false premise that we're worthy because we're achieving.
Yes. And sometimes there's a comfort in, I can remember thinking that I had so much to do. And instead of saying, okay, you want me to do this? Well, you're going to take off my plate, instead of doing that, because you know, I was doing all of this at work, and then because I felt guilty as a parent for putting so much energy into my work, I then felt I needed to give equal measure and go to all of the sports events, all of the kids stuff. Like, it was just this ridiculous, impossible to-do list. But I can remember one day thinking, instead of going, oh, I need to cross things off the list, I told myself I will only feel better once I've crossed everything off the list. And there's a comfort in that. And it's just,
Yeah.
this is where, you know, burnout recovery, where you often need support from someone like you, where you need coaching sometimes, because sometimes you're going to need those external compassionate eyes to kind of go, okay, take it back a step, because
Yeah.
we're so used, aren't we, to just
Yes.
going a mile a minute
Yeah.
and it can feel kind of scary and discombobulating to actually take your foot off the accelerator pedal.
It is. It really is. I mean, it's so you know, if I totally feel like that. I look at my own schedule and about what I'm trying to achieve, and actually, is it in line with my values? I'm really pondering that around. I want to really be in my life with my children. I've got 7-year-old twins, and I don't want to overcommit to work so that I miss stuff with them, and then it makes me get ratty and frustrated, and then that comes out in my mothering. And so, but it's so complicated because it's so gratifying to be efficient.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, when we talk about overworking, it links to perfectionism, it links to shifting expectations all the time and changing goalposts. But also, I think it really links to how rest was viewed as a child in our home, and were we allowed to, like so many people were not allowed to sleep late, or you had to get out of bed out of a certain time because your parents felt uncomfortable with you sleeping, or they like I had a mother who was always just trying to squeeze in one extra chore.
Okay.
And that's her word, chore. I mean, I never really heard anyone say chore. They more say task or to-do list. But there was always that time, that sort of trying to use each last bit of time. And I do that, trying to use each last bit of time. And so I'm really trying to unwind that and think it's okay to rest. But that's also very uncomfortable for our body, because we get signs of a sense of a lack of safety, I think, comes up. You really have to tolerate the discomfort in your own body when you let yourself rest.
Yeah. It's oh God, it's so good we're having this conversation with such honesty. I love it, because it's hard being a parent. I know I've got 2 teams, and actually just last night, because mine have just gone back to school after the Christmas break, and they both fell asleep on the sofa at 6 o'clock. And I'm like, oh boy, exactly. I was like, oh, don't worry, your body's just getting used to it. Remember, we've got dark at night. It's okay. We're gonna have a nutritious dinner, have a shower, get like really relaxed, go to bed, read, chill. It's all good. But that has taken a lot of proactive work on myself, and to realize, because I think a lot of parents, we want to do the best for our kids. We want to do the best in our parenting. And we forget that actually the best thing we can do, the greatest gifts, I always say, like little eyes are watching you, is to model this stuff and to fan the flames of the rest and relaxation, isn't it?
Yes.
Self-care really is not selfish. Show them how it's done. It doesn't even need to be this like in your face kind of method. Just show those daily practices of like reconnecting with yourself, isn't it?
Yeah. And like honoring sleep and honoring chill out time and sitting on the sofa. I mean, I think parenting is the hardest thing in the whole wide world. And sometimes some of the most lovely moments I've had with my children are just sitting on the sofa with them. They both still like to kind of crowd onto my lap as much as they can. And I love that, because then we can get cozy under a blanket and we can watch, I don't know. Unfortunately, we've been watching a program called Waffle a lot this holiday, because my kids just went back today to school, and I was just a bit tired of that. Waffle the Wonder Dog. I'm sure you've never heard of that, but I'm sure English parents might know that. But I think that there's so much pressure on parents to try and get everything right, and to squeeze in one last thing and to abandon ourselves at the cost of our children. And that will be so familiar for many of us, that abandonment, but it just serves no one.
I know, it really doesn't. It really doesn't. I mean, what are the things you would say to a client who you were helping? Because, you know, let's face it, you're burnt out. You've literally been abandoning yourself for, I feel, some people come to me and say, oh, I've been burnt out for 2 years. And in my mind, I'm thinking, it's going to be longer than that. Because, you know, that's the reality of it. How do you help someone kind of tap back into themselves? You know, they've been abandoning themselves. It's a tricky path, isn't it, to kind of switch gears? How do you help someone do that?
Well, I think it's a really long I mean, that's a really long process in a way, because you can't just say to someone, okay, you need to get a certain amount of hours of sleep
Yeah.
and do this, because actually we are the ones who have to implement those sort of changes, and our bodies are the one who've got so used to firing on only a short amount of time or short amount of sleep, and using a lot of caffeine or a lot of sugar to kind of to facilitate that. So I think that it's a lot about reconnecting to your body. And I think body-based therapies like massage and craniosacral therapy and any other things like that are really helpful for down regulating our nervous system. And I mean, I don't specifically focus on like working with burnout, but I think that things like, I think you need a full, like, you need to like look at your food and see how you're eating, and how does that facilitate, because often we're using a lot of sugar, or we are constantly setting ourselves up for blood sugar spikes. So then we reach for high fat, high sugar to push us through. So just shifting the way we eat is really helpful. I think it's really important actually to do gentle exercise, because we need to feel a bit, even when we, like, I often talk about having an ache in my back, and often it's better to just go for a 20-minute walk than for me to try and lie down, because if I'm not that good at sleeping during the day. I've never used to be able to do that, and now I can do that, but I need like a long lead time. I'm not one of those people who can just like lie down for 20 minutes and nap. That's impossible.
I'm like that too. Oh, I'm glad you said that. I'm like, I either do nothing or 3 hours.
Yes, I can't. I need to like calm my system sufficiently to actually sleep during the day, basically. And so for me, I'm more likely to get stressed if I have a short period of time. So I would rather then have an Epsom salt bath, because Epsom salts are very soothing. Like magnesium goes transdermally through your skin then. Or go for a 20-minute or half an hour walk, because that is uplifting. And not that I then want to be productive, but then I'm more likely to be able to, I'm more likely to feel better in my head, because I've shifted my nervous system state. And a little bit of physical tiredness, as opposed to just this mental exhaustion, helps. But I think that the beginning of a burnout journey is really about simplifying a lot. So cutting out, because most people, if what I do is I look at my diary at the beginning of the week, like ahead to the week, and I imagine how I'll feel in each day. And most people actually can say, oh yeah, that looks really quite heavy, even if they are not yet at the stage of being able to go, okay, I'm actually going to cancel that. They can actually look and think, oh yeah, on Monday, I've got these like 5 back-to-back meetings and I have to drive in between them, and that's going to absolutely kill me. So I think that's the first stage of kind of like looking at what have I actually got planned and where can I simplify, and having the willingness to do it, because no one is going to come to us and say, by the way, you need to only have 3 meetings that you're going to drive between. And I think so much of it is actually us going, yeah, I'm just not that superhuman machine. I wish I could be the superhuman machine, because it's gratifying to get all this feedback from people that I am a superhuman machine, but really we're just abandoning ourselves. And in the end, like if I do that to myself, say if I do have a Monday like that, I don't drive between meetings because I'm seeing clients in a fixed place. But then what happens is I'm really irritated at night, with my children. I want them to hurry up and go to bed. I I'm like disconnected at bath time because I'm like overwrought. And there's real consequences. And then often you can't actually sleep at night because you're too kind of worked up.
Yeah.
But going back to your question, I think I've started to waffle now, but I think magnesium is something that's really important for nervous systems. I'm not a naturopath or a doctor,
Yeah.
so I really want to say that, but most, I think the stats for America are that 80% of adults are deficient in magnesium.
Wow.
And it's really important for your nervous system. It's really important to sleep, especially if you wake up in the middle of the night and then you need to go back to sleep. It really helps with that. So, yeah, so our eating our food, gentle exercise, and really looking at our priorities.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how you spoke about values earlier on, because that's something that really helps you kind of shift from, because when you've been abandoning yourself for decades, you're like, I don't even know what I like. I
Yeah,
don't even know
exactly.
myself. It's a
No,
very
exactly.
real visceral feeling. You're like, oh, you can feel quite lost. And I think it's really
Yeah,
helpful, isn't it,
absolutely.
when you go back to center and go, actually, what do I value in life? Because I think from there onwards, it makes it easier to kind of reconnect with yourself, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. I think a values exercise is kind of the core of everything because then
Yeah.
when you're making a decision about, oh, should I commit to doing this extra piece of work? You're like, no, because actually I want to be present for my children. And that will mean that I have to squeeze in more work around the edges. So I'm going to say no to it.
Yeah.
But then we have to confront our fear of what happens if I say no to it. I mean, I think that that thing that you just said about I don't even know myself
Mm.
is it's very profound kind of trauma healing what we're talking about here. Like that
Yes.
reconnection to self and knowing that because many of us we learn about our needs through how our parents met our needs and how important our
Yeah.
needs were. And
Yeah.
so many of us just grew up tending to our parents
Yes.
and being their emotional coach or managing our siblings or doing household tasks or there's a lot of children parenting their parents, and by definition in that we are left out as the child. Our
Yes.
needs go by the wayside.
Absolutely. Because if you're growing up in an environment where you're constantly having to read the room and take the temperature, do that
Yeah,
emotional monitoring,
yeah,
um, ironically, and I've seen this in kind of the fields I've worked in, like within hospital play therapy and mental health, it actually becomes like your unique skill set that makes you very good at your job. But the problem
yeah,
is when you just only using those skill sets for that, you're not tapping into what you need, then that's when the self-abandonment comes, doesn't it? Like you just
yeah.
it's tricky. It's tricky. And I
Really
see
tricky.
that. I've experienced that myself and I see that for other people. It's tricky to be like, yeah, but this skill set made me a great success. But how am
Yes.
I going to now change it that I look after myself but can still kind of, use that skill set for my work or, helping others or, you know.
Yeah, and you obviously are using it to help others with this, with all your work you do. But I think that I always characterize this as that our radar is turned outwards. So we're sending signals out constantly when what you were saying about the emotional temperature. And then we adjust our behavior so that they will be okay,
Yes.
so that we can be safe. And we needed to do that in childhood, many of
Yeah.
us. But we have to learn that in adulthood, um, we are safe, even if we do something that they find a bit displeasing or doesn't work for them. But that's a really, you have to really practice at that, practice sitting with other people's displeasure at your boundaries and at you saying, no, I can't do that, or no, I can't, overextend yourself. Because especially at work, um, bosses, like people like me and you make fabulous employees. No one's going to turn around and say you're delivering too much.
I know it's so true.
It's just no one's going to
Yeah.
say that.
No, it's so true. It's so true. I've listened to your podcast and you've shared some beautiful conversations on your podcast. really touching on this, and that other people's experiences of growing up, and kind of I really loved the Josh Conley one. Oh my God, that was so good. That was such a good episode. I loved it. It was so good.
Oh, good.
Um, it's I guess I share this because I want people to know when you're not alone.
No,
Because I come back to this often in my work, because I'm aware that people do feel so alone and isolated and lost, but you're not alone.
no.
And I think I love how you talk about shame, in the sense of, the more we share our stories, the less that shame can thrive. We need to be sharing our stories
Yeah,
and having those open conversations.
yeah. And we've all got a beautiful story. I deeply believe that
Yeah.
everyone has got their own story, and they're all important and valid. And but many of us learned, and actually, one of my main purposes behind Grow Yourself Up is to break down shame, because
Oh,
I've had some experiences in my life where people have really like broken shame down for me,
okay.
and it's been really, really freeing, like really freeing. And so many of us, because the shame, because basically perfectionism and all these adaptations are to try and cover over that shame, that terrible feeling that you sometimes get where you think, I actually am really shit, like I've totally got it wrong, I'm a terrible person, I've missed the boat. And when you're in that shame spiral, um like reaching for more work or more perfectionism seems to be what will help, but really we just need someone to say, but you're not, there's nothing wrong with you, you're just having a tricky time. Or someone did a post, like I can go into a shame spiral on Instagram thinking I'm like rubbish or done a crap post or something, or someone thinks I'm an idiot or something because I've got a quite a big shame core. But then someone just goes, it's okay, not everyone's going to like you, or of course you were having a tricky time, you've been through so much, in your mothering or something like that. And when someone is warm and sees you, then you can kind of just, you like get that feeling, oh yeah, I am lovable, I am okay, and
Yeah.
we just need that more.
We do. Oh my God, we really do. And something that I think, and I'm trying to kind of model to my boys, and it's really tricky though, and it's that piece of not only loving yourself, because let's face it, it's really easy to be like, yeah, I'm really proud of myself, I really love myself when you've done X, Y, and Z. But
Yeah,
on the days when you're like, oh, I made a mistake, or oh, that is uncharacteristically not like me, and I've, messed up on that. Those are the days that it's really hard to love
yeah,
yourself and show yourself compassion, but those are the ones that you really have to double down on and do it.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
so right. Like I think those are the days. We were just talking before this when we said about, it's really, it's hard to be imperfect. It's really hard.
It is.
Um, I find it when I've like on the days when I've been like thinking, can you just get out of my face towards my children? Like, when they're
Yeah.
like under my feet and I'm like, oh my God, like just leave or go back to school, just move. Um, to be so gentle to myself about, I mean, I don't want to be talking like that or kind of putting that energy out, but there are days that I am like that
Yeah.
because I'm overwhelmed myself, and to just be really soft with myself. And because the softness with ourselves, um, that's reparenting, the really giving ourselves the loving, nurturing that we didn't get. And also, then we can access more ability to actually connect. Because when we're feeling, when we're in that kind of shame and beating up on ourselves place, we can't access the compassion and the connection for others either.
Yeah. Oh, so true. I can remember when my kids were little, and I was working with children. So I'd work all day with children, and then you're coming home and you're making dinner and you got your and honestly, Kath, sometimes it was just the bloody sheer noise, the volume. Do you know, you're
Yeah,
making dinner and the volume. And so I would put earplugs in because I
yeah,
thought it's not their fault that they're having fun and talking and laughing and I don't know, shouting and Spider-Man's being thrown across the living room.
Yeah.
But also I had to be like, I've got to look after myself here. Like I have
Yeah.
to nurture myself. And I would often be like, what would I tell my friend? You know, and
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh, I'd tell her to
Yeah.
put bloody earplugs in. So I
Yeah.
had to try, if you can't kind of, if it doesn't feel natural to start to talk to your self-compassion, try and think of what you would say to a friend, because
Yes,
that
that's an excellent
loving
way.
message is there, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And I think you're right, because I think many people can't, they think they're not deserving of it. And especially with
Oh,
the burnout thing, I think that um, because of the tie with the perfectionism, I mean, I initially, and lots of people I've worked with feel like this, that self-compassion is some sort of a cop-out, that you're taking the easy road and you're kind of letting yourself off the hook.
yes.
And it's absolutely not. It's absolutely
Yeah.
not. And particularly when we have not had our needs met in childhood, we need tons and tons and tons of self-compassion. And you might not think that you haven't had your needs met in childhood. So that can sometimes be a really rude awakening when you look back on your childhood and you think, gosh, it really sort of was a bit of a desert.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I'm really glad you touched on that, because that is something, um, absolutely. You can definitely start to experience all sorts of things because, I mean, let's face it, if you were a child who was crisis managing, that emotional monitoring,
Yeah.
it's confronting. You've used this word. It's confronting when you're like, hang on a minute, that wasn't great, because you're
Yeah.
so used to trying to make them feel better and make sure they're okay, because then that makes your life a lot easier. And
Yeah.
those moments you start to walk down a path and start to go, oh, that that wasn't cool and that wasn't
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Really shower yourself in self-compassion, because, as you
Yeah.
say, it's going to feel confronting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very painful. And I think that many of us, denial is a very, very helpful protective mechanism. And sometimes it's easier to stay in denial and say, it was lovely, or I'm very close to my parents, or my mum's my best friend, when actually your mum is not your best friend. It's that you constantly phone her 10 times a day and make her feel better about her life. But actually looking at that and going, oh, wow, there's nothing about this that actually nourishes me, is so painful, because then you have to really confront the reality of all the other losses and what you might never have got. So it's sometimes easier to stay in that place of the fantasy of what it might be like without actually noticing how much you're giving away.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And again, it speaks to why it's it's important, it's nourishing, it's absolutely good to have someone that you work with like yourself, so you have that kind of support, someone to lean on those days that you think,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
because it can feel really confront. I don't know. It's a very discombobulating path to start walking down. The good news is that as you start walking down, you start to really feel free, and you start
Yeah.
to replace. I want people to know that, if they're just starting this path here, keep going, keep going, keep going, and get
Yeah.
help and support from someone like Cath, because the further down the path you get, the more lighter you start to feel and free. And that's when you
Yeah.
can really, it becomes so much easier to start loving yourself compassionately and wanting the best for yourself, which then trickles out to your circle and you're modeling to, those in your life, whether you have children, whether you have co-workers, to me, keep going down that path, because it's a win-win. But it's you need someone to hold your hand. You need someone to cheer you on, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, that can come in the form of many things. Like you can have a recovery group, or a
Okay.
psychotherapist or a
Yeah.
coach or whatever. But I think that it takes so much. It's very brave to look at the patterns that we've had in our lives, I think, and kind of courageous to start to tend to ourselves, because I actually don't think it's selfish,
Mm.
um, because it's scary when you kind of look at all the things you've learned and realize how disconnected you are from self, and how how, like, many things you land up doing might not have actually been because you wanted to do that.
Yes.
You know, we make career decisions, or we choose partners based on what other people think. And so it's so liberating to then notice, oh yeah, I like this. I can actually have more of that in my life, or I can change my career and I can actually do something I really love. And that process of getting to know oneself is so kind of, it's very special actually. And I suppose I want to say to your listeners that everyone is worthy. Like, that no one listening must ever think other people are more worthy. Everyone is um like, everyone is deserving. Everyone.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Because let's face it, there'll be some people like me who you kind of go, nah, nah, like you're just so used to putting other people's needs above your own that
Yeah.
it feels so strange to prioritize your own needs, and
Yeah.
then it does become gift wrapped in like, I'm not worthy. I'll be able to have that when I do X, Y, and Z. When I achieve this,
Yeah.
this, and this, then I can have that. It's
Yeah.
as opposed to being like, love, you need this right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really glad you said that. Again, this is why you're brilliant, Cath. Like, you just put out these lovely whispers of compassion and warmth out there. This is what we need to be hearing more from you. You know, it's so important, isn't it? Because I know how hard it is to access that permission piece.
Yeah, it is. The permission piece, I think, is just so huge. We're all looking for someone else to sign off on the fact that we don't have to do as much, or that we are valuable, um, you know, just when we've done this much work. And I mean, I'm also doing that. I'm looking for, I want to achieve one certain thing, and I find it, I've let it go for a while, but I keep coming back to that. And it's a real kind of, it's that coming back to the values. I really have to keep coming back and thinking, what is it that I want to have in my life? You know, I'm nearly 50.
Okay.
I can't believe I mean, I sound so old, but I am.
Stop it.
Okay, I'm 47. I'm 47. I'm not going to say I'm nearly 50.
No,
I'm
and I'm
just after
46. We're
55.
fine, darling. We're fine.
Yeah, we're fine. No, but like, I'm 47 and I've got 7-year-old twins, and I'm like, what is it that I want for my children to feel about their childhood? And how does that impact about how I, you know, my division between work and parenting, and how, like, what gives me a lot of joy? And sometimes I think work gives me more joy than parenting, because it's much easier it's more in my control, and it's that kind of gratifying thing. But what really gives me joy is being with my children when I am connected and peaceful, and not feeling stressed about something else that I should be achieving, or that I feel I should be achieving. And so it's like really a complex pattern, I think, to unwind, of coming back into our own lives and believing, like, that the ordinary beauty is enough, if you know what I mean.
Oh my gosh, it absolutely is. And you know what's really interesting? Because I'm listening to this and I'm like, oh, Cath, like, just you being you, your kids are just like, it's an absolute gift. Like, they're just going to be able to watch you and learn from you and just be, and you'd be really like, I'm thinking, oh, you're lucky, lucky kids. Like, it's all good. So it's interesting. You're there going, oh, but like, is this the kind of parent I want to be? But what's really interesting? When I was working with a coach, and working on self-love and self-compassion, one of the exercises was to get someone to write a love note to you, like, say all the things they love about you, right? Okay, now honestly, it took me all of a week, because I thought, oh, I can't ask anyone to do that. Like, I don't want to put them out, I don't want to put pressure on them, I don't want, do you know what I mean? Couldn't ask
Yeah,
anyone.
yeah,
I speak to my best friend like every day. I couldn't ask her. But me, literally the day before I had to see her for my coaching session, I thought, oh my God, I can't be late with my homework.
yeah.
So,
I've got to
so
be good.
I know. So you know what? I ended up asking my son, who he would have been 16 at the time, because he's very brutal, very honest, wants to be a stand-up comic. And I thought, oh, you know what? Like, he's just gonna like say whatever. So I said, hey, I've got this exercise. Would you mind doing it? He was like, yeah, come here. And he got his paper out. And honestly, Cath, I was like, oh my God, it was the most beautiful letter. And it was all the simple things that he loved about me. It wasn't, as a parent, you're like, oh, I want to be able to do this and provide them with this and then take them there, here. And it wasn't any of those things. It was like
Yeah.
really, really simple things that he
Yeah.
loved about me. And I just thought, I actually said to him, oh my God, as a parent, there were many days where I thought, oh, I'm a bit of a dick at this. And he went, Mum, never, never. And I thought, oh, and it's going to be the same for you. Here you are going, oh, I'm trying to do this, this, and this. And your kids are going to go up being, oh my God, my mum is this amazing psychotherapist who's just like putting out all these positive messages. And she was just so real with us. It's going to be the same.
But they want, it's true what you said about the simple things. In holidays, it's funny you say that, because I took them to well, actually, I want to know what your son said. So then I'll tell you my story. What did he say? What did he say were the things that he
Oh
loved?
my God. I used to have it on my pinboard because I was like, I've got to look at this every day. It was really simple things like you always make us laugh, you always give us a hug, you're always asking how we are, you're always it was like simple, simple stuff. Because I'm thinking, oh, I want to take them, I want to take them to Rome and go round the Colosseum because they look, I'm thinking of all these big scale things that I'm like, oh, I never got to do that. And oh, ridiculous. And he was like, oh, I love it when you start making us laugh about X, Y, and Z. And I love it when what was it? When you start making sound effects in the car. It was really
Oh, that's so
silly,
sweet.
silly, simple things that I don't even register I'm doing. They were like, I love that. That's the best thing. And I thought, oh my God.
That's so sweet. And that's also so important actually for your listeners who listen to Burnout Recovery, because often we set ourselves up, and I do this as well. I set myself up for big things, which
Yeah.
might be too much for my own window of tolerance, actually. And then they don't necessarily like them that much. And then you're like, oh my God, why did I bother? And really what they like, because I took my kids to like a trampolining park
Okay.
last week, because they went back to school today, and I was like, okay, let's do something nice like lovely on Friday, and we'll go for lunch. And at the trampolining park, they both complained about, well, one wanted to go on some clip and climb section, which I was like, no, we're not going to do that. That's way too complicated for me. And they complained about the noise, and they wanted to drink like very strange colored I don't know, smoothies or something. And I was like, no, I'm not buying those drinks. So then they got cross about that. And then we went for lunch, and the lunch was nice. But what they most love is when we play games at home, like whatever games. There's a bingo game we've been playing a lot of, and another game, I don't know, some memory game or something. And they like the time when I just sit on the floor with them.
Yeah.
And we play games, and we
Yeah.
just play and we connect, or we bake. They like baking.
Okay.
And so it's the simple stuff, really, and it's the stuff that doesn't tax us too much, actually. So this is like a good reminder.
Yes, it is. It is. It's the stuff that doesn't tax us and the stuff that we can just really be ourselves,
Yeah.
Yes. Oh.
Actually, baking does tax me, if I'm honest with them, but anyway. but but again, I don't know. I feel like I'm waffling now, Flic.
No, it's funny. I was never a parent. I bloody hate board games. I don't know what it is. I just really struggle to do board games. So I was never that parent. I'd have to really force myself to play them. And looking back now, I'm like, why didn't I just say, oh, it's not my jam, but I'll do this, this, and this with you? Like,
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with just being honest and open, because I'd want my boys to be that way. In fact, I actually see
exactly.
that. I see that in them. They'll actually, be very honest and go, yeah, no, love, I ain't doing that.
I don't like that. And it's true, because I think I used to feel like that about crafts, that I needed to be a crafty mom.
Okay. Yeah.
And I do let them paint at home. I know they do quite a lot of painting, but I'm not like I don't know what to do with, like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know all those crafting things, but like pom-poms and like,
Oh, I know. Glitter
I
and
don't
Fimo and oh my God.
all of those things. And I used to always wish I could be like that. But I think there's something about, all of us are different, and we have to really accept and celebrate like our own selves and what we like, where we come alive, and sharing that with them. Because I think there's more likely to come more burnout when we set ourselves up to be like, I'm going to bake with them every day, or I'm going to do this every day. Like the simplest, easiest things, like more ease, more ease, more ease, more ease. May we all have more ease.
Yeah, because our to-do lists are already long enough. So to put parenting like moments of joy on the to-do list, it just sets them up for like misery, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then we get like really pissed off
Oh
when, I hope
God,
I'm
I
allowed to
know.
sort of say rude words here, but
Oh yeah. It's me,
we
yeah.
get really like, when
Yeah.
you've most tried to set up those magical moments, or the moments which are the least magic.
Oh my gosh, there's nothing worse, is there, when you've done something and that you just see their faces. You're like, oh, for the love of God. But meanwhile, you could have just sat on the floor in your pajamas with a cup of coffee and just played a simple game that they enjoy. And that's the things they're going to remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that that's quite hard for us when we're perfectionists, because there's that idea of, I've got to get up, I've got to get out the house, we've got to go and do stuff.
Yeah.
And so tolerating, learning to sit with our enoughness. Often, sometimes we have to have a burnout, I think, to even get to that point of being prepared to try things that are simpler or less glamorous or less hard.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Especially if you
But
were
easy.
brought up in an environment where appearances matter.
Yes, yes,
That's a big one. That's a big one.
yes. Oh,
Um,
yeah, that's a huge, absolutely huge thing, I think.
yes, yeah. And I guess if you're listening to this, and this is resonating, I just want to say, I see you, I hear you, keep going. Because it's, as you say, it's brave work to look at inside this box and look at what you want to change for yourself.
Yeah,
It's I champion anyone to do it. I really do.
yeah,
It's hard work, but keep going because it's really freeing and liberating. And
yeah,
I think only, you know, joy and happiness is the other side of it, without it being that toxic positivity, joy and happiness. I mean, like proper, real, that that calm and ease you feel in your nervous system,
yeah. Like
you
real
know?
connection to self, and connection
Yes.
to ourselves, even when we're being, because we're so, it's such a big shift to really love and honor ourselves when we're sad or grumpy or rude or unkind. Um,
Yeah.
but many of us were really kind of punished or ignored or sent away when we were like that as a child. So it's so healing to claim that back, and to know that, it's part of being human, all of
It
those things.
is. It is. Because how many of us were brought up and told, don't be Mardy. What are you sulking about? What are you upset about? Stop crying.
Yeah.
Or gosh, that ridiculous one. Like, I'll give you something to cry about. Oh my God,
Yes.
it's so silly, isn't it?
I know, but
You
it's so
know,
threatening.
it
Like,
is.
imagine if our partner said that to us, but that
I
was what we
know.
said to children constantly.
I know. It's so, so silly. And yeah, but I think there's a lot of, I know the world's I don't know, it feels heavy at the moment, doesn't it? And there's a lot going on in the world, but I do feel there's a lot of hope when I look at my kids and their perspective on the world and the things
Yeah.
they're doing. I'm like, there is hope. There is hope.
I think there's
No?
so much hope. I mean, there's like such atrocities going on in the world where it is so heavy, but
Yeah.
I think that we're at the end of a period of this power over capitalism and kind of patriarchy and white supremacy,
Yes.
um, and I think I've took in the last kind of 3 years, I've taken a lot of comfort in astrology, and we're coming into the age of Aquarius, and the age of Aries and Pisces are ending, and so it's going to be, I think there's going to be different things replacing the patriarchy. I mean, I don't know
Oh,
what that's going to look like, but I feel like all of these type of conversations where we are advocating for coming back to yourself, and
yes.
then being in community actively with others who are doing that, it's so powerful, because we're going to change the world with love. I deeply, deeply believe in that.
I know. And what better thing? I mean, it's the only, and when you look at it, everything boils down to love, love for yourself and love for others, doesn't it? You
Yeah,
know? It really does. Yeah. Oh my gosh. This has been the loveliest chat, Kath. Thank you. I mean, oh my gosh, it
It's a
feels
pleasure.
really nourishing. I feel like I've been wrapped up in a blanket. A cup of cocoa. That was fabulous. I just know it's your wisdom. You just have this lovely magic. It's really going to help a lot of people out there. And I just love the work you do and the message you put out there. It's brilliant. So,
Thank you, Flic.
oh.
That's very generous.
Now,
Thank you.
at the end of our chats, I've been asking guests like quick fire, light-hearted questions because I find it really interesting. We all answer differently. So, if you're up for it, I'd love to know on
Sure,
your
I'm up for it.
dodgy, tougher days, do you opt for move your body or move the remote?
Sometimes both, but often actually an Epsom salt bath.
Yeah, that's your thing. Yeah.
An Epsom salt bath because if I have time, uh, it really helps me feel better. And I go for a little walk.
Yeah.
Um, I don't watch that much TV. Normally, if I don't do something healthy, it's more like I sort of moan around and I don't get anything done. So that makes me feel worse.
Oh, I
I kind of
know.
I want to rest, but I don't do anything. I scroll endlessly or do something useless. So I'm really trying more of the time to just think, okay, you're allowed to have a bath or to just go for a quick walk and to just,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
I phone a friend, on days when I'm like really in my own inner child and I'm feeling like I can't see the wood for the trees. I phone someone who was really loving and nourishing and can, um,
Oh,
mirror back to you because we need compassion, but sometimes we can't access it ourselves.
no, no. It's lovely to have that, as you say, mirrored back to you. Yeah. I love that. Okay. Now, bag of almonds or bag of Maltesers?
Bag of Maltesers.
Oh no, I know. Maltesers and a cup of tea. There's just nothing like you to say.
Your
Um,
chocolate and a cup of tea.
I know. Do you ask for help or are you happy to hermit?
I ask for help.
Oh, that's amazing. That's
I ask for
amazing.
help.
That's someone who's done the work. Well done.
I think we're all really deserving of lots of help, actually. I mean, like having like a whole support system and, around us is in as many ways as we can get help. I'm a big fan of asking for help.
Oh, I love that. Okay, and then what's the one self-compassionate thing you're going to do today that your future self will thank you for?
I'm not going to eat gluten.
Okay, yeah.
I've got a autoimmune condition and it's taken me a long time to really commit to like my health really properly.
Yeah.
And I feel sometimes really I have a lot of grief about not having bread
Yeah.
or the bread that I like. So I'm really committing to that really properly because I've gone in and out of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to do. It's hard to do. And it's that like that psychology is soon as someone says you can't have that, I'm like, oh, I really want it now. You
It
know?
feels so deprivational. And I mean, I feel like a bit ashamed even sharing that because it's such a like what a first world problem that is. But it's so I've had to really look at what are the ways that I'm not helping myself,
I was going to
because
say it speaks to the daily practice it takes to look after yourself. That's
yeah,
what I hear. And it's amazing to come hear that coming from you because it just goes to show it is a daily practice and it's something we need to commit to and look after ourselves. And it's okay to be human and have a day where we're
yeah,
like, oh, didn't do it.
yeah.
But yeah,
Yes, I'm really trying to because I notice in times when I feel overwhelmed, I don't have capacity to really like tend to myself very gently with food, but I'm really working on that.
oh, go for it. Well done. Oh, Kath, this was an absolutely beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I know, your wisdom's really going to help some listeners out there. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Flic. It's been really joyful. Thank you so much.